Hey tribe, today I have Laylee Emadi with me. She's an amazing educator, coach, podcast, and conference host. We talked about her transition from a dance coach into a coach for educators. We talked about the conference that she hosts and why that's a very unique value to the audience that she serves. We talk about drawing some parallels between coaching athletes and coaching entrepreneurs, all the common threads that she finds when it comes to struggles, and all the great things about coaching and how we can help other people. I love that we talked about coaching. That is my go to offer to you guys. One on one coaching is something that I absolutely love. Please check accidentalceo.co coaching for all the coaching options that we have. I'm so excited for you guys to learn more about Laylee. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Accidental CEO podcast, where we bridge the gap between the creativity you love and the CEO mindset you need. I'm your host, Nata wedding photographer and business educator. Find full show notes and resources at accidentalceopod.com. Let's get into today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Accidental CEO podcast. I'm your host, Nata Salvatore, and today I have Laylee Emadi with me. Laylee is an educator, speaker, and podcast host, and the founder of the Creative Educator Conference, which was an amazing conference that I attended the first time this year. And you bet I'm going to be there next year and the year after and the year after. And as long as you have this, it was a great opportunity for great connections. A lot of the hosts that you're going to hear on the podcast this year came from connections that I made in this conference. And I know it has a lot of great, amazing things to offer. And so does Laylee. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. What an amazing introduction.
All of it is all true. No fluff on that one. Perfect. So I wanted to just hear a little bit more about your story as, an accidental CEO to potentially coming from the life before, if there was one, before you became an educator and speaker and host and all the good things that you do. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I am a complete accidental CEO, like 100% accidental. I was a high school teacher for a long time, and I loved doing that. And I had kind of a side hustle of a few different creative things, but nothing that I thought would be a career. I always wanted my career to be in education, and I loved being a teacher. I was not the type of teacher that thought, how can I get out of this? I really loved what I did, and I tried to do teaching and business ownership at the same time. I did it for several years, and it's just a lot, as you know. Running a business full time is so much work. Being a CEO is so much work, and it's rewarding work. And I obviously could not balance the two after quite some time. So I loved what I did, as I said, and I had my side hustle of photography. That's the thing that I leaned into the most. And over time, as the photography business grew, I got a lot of requests from people wondering, how do I use my camera? And then those people, I would teach them how to use their camera. And of course, that turned into, how do I start a business with my camera? And then as that went on, those same people over the past 10, 11 years started to thrive and flourish. And then they wanted to help the other people that were a few steps behind them. And then it became, how do I get started in education and in speaking and in course creation and workshops? And so that's what I do now. So all of this was like a very organic path, but also very much accidental CEO. I just love teaching, and I wanted to always leave impact no matter what I did. And it just happens to be that where I'm doing that now is in the role of CEO of a business.
Yeah, I love that. What kind of photography did you do before?
So I did a little bit of everything, but I got started in dance and seniors because I was a high school teacher, and I actually was the director of the dance program at our high school. So it was, again, just a very accidental, this will be a fun project. Let's all incorporate photography. It's another form of a fine art. And I fell in love with it. And then my students started getting older. And as they started graduating, their parents would hire me. And that turned into seniors and portraits. And then, of course, those seniors, now I'm old, so they're all married, and now they are having babies and families. And so it just kind of escalated. I did weddings for a few years, but that wasn't That wasn't like my favorite thing in the world. I love the wedding day, but everything else about it was a lot. So portraits were my jam.
I love that. Yeah, I can definitely see you like incorporating that into the teaching environment and then out of the sudden kind of finding that opportunity to maybe start your own business. Did you have any background on any of like business or maybe family entrepreneurs that kind of gave you that support and feedback on when you started your own business?
I mean, honestly, I had a little bit of experience in freelancing because as a dancer, I grew up a dancer, and so I did a lot of freelance choreography, and I got to, I knew what it was to have a client hire me in and go provide a service and leave, but it was definitely not at all like what it takes to actually run the business. My family, I had no entrepreneurs in my family. However, I am a first generation immigrant family. And so I wasn't born in the States. And I think having parents who are immigrants and watching them on their journey of coming to another country and having to really be scrappy and smart and driven and motivated and resilient, all of those things I think really fed into my work ethic, which I think feeds into my job now as an entrepreneur. But it was definitely not something that my family was like, yeah, here's some here's some good tips and tricks. It was more like, are you sure? Because we sent you to college to have a steady job. Maybe you be careful.
Yeah, I just hope one day my kids can give the same speech about watching us coming from another country and working hard, and hopefully that will bleed into their, work ethics and visions and values too. I can definitely appreciate that.
Oh, I'm sure they will. I'm sure there's no way that kids who have parents go through this journey, there's no way they're not watching you and just like soaking it all up. And then when they get older, the appreciation is it's like another world of appreciation for sure.
Yeah, a little bit of a tangent, but it's such a hard balance. Like knowing that we are who we are because of the things that went through, because of the struggles and difficulties and like the resilience that you build, but then at the same time wanting to give your kids an easier life. And are you working so hard to make it easier for them, but are you taking it away? That experience and that life, situation. And it's just such a hard balance, something that I'm always thinking about and struggle with a lot. So I try to create opportunities for them to see the world and see how things are in places that are not like their current reality, because that's what I know exists. And that they have no idea. They don't know what they don't know. So it's hard to bridge that gap.
Yeah, and I think just by honestly, it is hard, and I feel that way. My parents tried really hard to make my life like to hide the things that were difficult and make it feel really easy. But I mean, they're so observant. Kids are so observant, and they're going to see the example that you're setting. So I think no matter all the work that you're doing is going to pay off regardless of like how easy or hard you make it. Like I know my parents were always hoping I wouldn't end up spoiled, but also hoping I wouldn't have to work that hard. But at choosing to work because of what's been modeled for me, I think is just a whole different rewarding kind of thing.
So, coming from teaching dancers, which are athletes, right? So, there's a big combination of skill and mindset to then teaching entrepreneurs. I'm sure there's some parallels in there, some things that you see that are common. So, giving you an idea of some of the things that you see in both worlds, or you saw in both worlds, and that you continue to try to help your clients through.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was just thinking about this the other day and I realized a lot of things that I hadn't ever put together before. So it's fun that you already thought of that because it's taken me a really long time to draw those parallels. But honestly, first and foremost, everybody I've worked with my entire life has been extremely competitive and in a very competitive environment, but also really community driven. And I think the balance of that has been really interesting because it's not an aggressive or ugly competition or competitiveness. It's almost like self-competitive more than against your quote unquote actual market competitors. So it's just like athletes, I think entrepreneurs are always wanting to one up themselves. They may get the inspiration from an outside perspective, but it's really not about like the other person they're watching. It's how can I take this and better it, and then how can I do it again and make that even better? I think about even my conference, for example, like I know I had all these ideas. I could only obviously do what was realistic, but then the next year is like how can I make it even better? And now I'm like how can I make that even better? So I think that same thing happens with athletes. I also think, like I said, the community part of it is that, well, one, I realized the other day that the majority, and not 100% by any means, but the majority of who I've worked with my entire life have been females. So they've been like women, whether it be dancers, just because that is a very female dominated industry. And then, of course, in this creative world, I've chosen to work primarily with women because I feel like that's where obviously my training is. But I did it without even thinking about it. So I think that parallel of, at heart, we are the same kinds of teenage girls that I've been working with. We're just older versions of them doing a different thing. So it's really interesting. I feel like every person I work with, I can see them in the different seasons of their life.
So as a coach now for entrepreneurs and as a coach who also coached volleyball players in the past, I can definitely see the parallels, the resemblance of, it's a ton of skill training, but if you don't have the right mindset, you just cannot put those skills into practice. And that's what I run into a lot on my coaching, world is people that have the skill sets. They know what needs to be done. They see it. They just like cannot move forward. They're paralyzed for whatever reason. There's a ton of mindset shifts that need to happen. And like you said, if you're not focused on bettering yourself, and yes, you can go get inspiration, but I feel like when people are looking too far out to the sides, they forget to keep focus on moving forward. So I can definitely see how there's a lot of common things that they can help people address from your skills as a dance coach and now as an educator.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you said about the skills, I mean, growing any kind of skill set, I think it's the same process, right? Just volleyball, dance, entrepreneurship, the whatever skill set is behind whatever industry you're in, it's all the same process of honing those skills and being really dedicated to that craft, whatever it is. And for me now, coaching speakers, that's primarily who I work with. And I always have to tell them, it took you so long to get good at whatever it is that you're talking about. So give yourself the same amount of time to get really good at talking about it, teaching it. That's its own skill set as well. So I love that you brought that up.
Patience is definitely a habit that we all can practice a little bit more. Be more Give more grace to yourself. Right? Give yourself some grace and be patient as you grow those skills and continue to change your mindset. Definitely makes a difference. So let's talk about your podcast a little bit. You host a podcast called So Here's the Thing, which I love. What have been some most maybe surprising or enlightening moments that you have experienced with your guests?
Oh my gosh, so many. I've had this podcast for about 5 years now. So I've been really lucky to have incredible guests and bring some of them back for 2 or 3 times and have people I've never met before. I think for me, overall, I guess the biggest moments for me have been realizing that I know so little about so many things in the world. And that's totally fine, but it's almost been like beautifully eye-opening that I can learn. I've started having people on that I just want to learn from. And I tell them, I'm very honest with my audience. I always tell our listeners during the interviews, I'm like, I had this person on because I need to learn about X, Y, and Z, and we're going to learn it together because I think that in itself, I think is a lesson that we want to be the experts in what we do, but it's okay not to know everything about everything. So I think that's been one of the biggest takeaways is that no matter how many people I have on, I'm always going to be learning something from every episode, which has been really cool.
That's great. I actually talked about this not too long ago. Having hosted a podcast got me excited about learning again, which is something I really love. And every time you sit down with somebody, you're learning something new. So I'm like looking forward to the next episode. And, it's my learning time that I have lost for a few years because I'm so busy working on the business that I forgot to dedicate it some time for learning. And the podcast brought that back to me. So I'm very grateful for it. Tell me about the conference. So, what inspired you to found the Creative Educator Conference, and what is maybe a unique value that it offers to the people that attend?
Yeah, so I actually had the idea for the conference back in 2018 when I was creating the Creative Educator Academy, which was my signature kind of course for foundational knowledge of how to create education within our industry. No matter what niche industry you're in, if you're a creative entrepreneur, I wanted to be able to teach just the foundations because so many people had a hard time getting into mentoring or coaching, getting into podcasting, getting into course creation or speaking. And so I thought every educator is eventually going to have to dabble in every format. So let me create something that teaches them the foundations of this. And so that's what I did with the academy. And there was always supposed to be an in-person component to that experience. And it was always going to be conference style. Well, we created it in 2018. We launched it in 2019, and the in-person component was planned for 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen.
Lots didn't happen that year.
Yeah, a lot didn't happen that year. So it definitely went to the back burner. We took our time to kind of rethink, okay, well, we're going to have to rethink it all anyway. Let's kind of somewhat burn it down and see how we can make it more transformational for more people, but still with the same heart of something for educators. Like you said yourself, and I think like all of us experience as we become really busy and really established and we become experts in what we do, there is so little that we can, I guess, attend with the intention of learning at the level that we're at. And so I think that's the most unique thing about the educator conference is I wanted the people in the audience to normally be on stages, which has been such an interesting thing in so many ways because everybody wants to be on the stage, but we all need to also be in the audience at some point. So, and at every point, honestly. And so I think that that's been like the most unique and also challenging thing about hosting the Creative Educator Conference has been that we're all on the same playing field. That playing field is elevated. It is a more experienced place. It's not a place for beginners. Creating an environment that actually follows through where they get great education from the stage, but they also get great education from the fellow attendees. And I feel like from everything I've heard, we have been able to deliver that so far. Hoping to keep that going. But yeah, that was like kind of the long and short of the idea and then how long it took to come to fruition. So again, like you said, the patience part of it was difficult, but I had to have it.
Absolutely agree that the big value that kind of differentiates that conference is that you can learn just as much from the people sitting next to you that you can from the people on the stage, which is really hard to find out there. You know, you really curated a great environment for people to come and collaborate, network, and continue to be interested in learning. Coming from, somebody who changed professions, at some point I went to so many conferences, I presented at conferences, and for the last few years of my career in physical therapy, I felt like I was going to conferences literally just to see old friends and hang out with the people that I knew. And it wasn't a ton of learning happening. I'll purposely go sit in specialty lectures that had nothing to do with what I was practicing just so I could learn something new. I was never going to use that in my day-to-day work, but I was just craving some new learning, and because it was so spread thin from beginners to people who have been practicing for so many years, it kind of lost the ability to kind of that teaching component in combination with the networking. And it kind of just, to me, fell through the cracks of like really delivering that. And that's what you do so well with your conference. And I was very excited to participate on that.
Thank you so much. But I agree. It's been really hard for me as well to find things that I want to attend where I feel like I'm learning. And I did the exact same thing. I was always going to these conferences that were for either all ranges or mostly beginners, and it was really just a fun time to hang out with friends. And I was like, I could do this. I could schedule time to see my friends and not
Yeah.
pay to go to this conference.
We just rent an Airbnb somewhere really nice and
Exactly.
hang out together. Yeah. So you talk a lot about leading with heartfelt encouragement and honest guidance, and I think that's in relationship to your coaching. Can you share maybe a personal story that illustrate how these values are important to you and how you incorporate them when you're coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I think back to when I was first really forming the parameters around how I wanted to be as a coach. I had several clients at once. Obviously, I had a few different coaching clients going on at the same time. And I learned really quickly because I am a very honest person and I've kind of gotten this reputation in this industry for being like the sassy one, but I'm truly I don't mean to be sassy. Like I don't mean to be, I don't mean to be out here with like hot takes every 2 seconds just to stir the pot. I just believe in being honest and I think it does everybody a disservice when you're not. And so I had a couple clients at the same time, but I realized that just like teenagers, again, full circle to like my training as an educator for like an actual educator by trade, is that every student and every coaching client and every human takes things differently. And so I had two at the same time, one of whom was like, don't sugarcoat things for me, because I do. I try to deliver everything with heartfelt encouragement. That is something that's really important to me because I know how I like to be spoken to. I don't like people to be dishonest, but I like to soften the blow a little. I think there's like a difference between tough love and tough love laced with extra kindness. There's levels. And I realized really quickly that everybody learns it really differently, but that at the core, you cannot go wrong if you're giving people heartfelt encouragement while also giving them honest advice and feedback. And I think finding that balance is one of the most difficult things for any educator. And I definitely fumbled like a few times because I did have people who thought, I want you to be even harder on me. And I had some that were like, oh, this is hurtful. Like I need a little bit more heartfelt in there. And so I think that was a time where I really had to figure out that balance, and also how to be able to pivot if somebody doesn't like something, and to be able to gauge if someone is really taking that advice well or if it's just stressing them out.
Hey there, are you a creative professional looking to elevate your business and artistic vision? Discover the transformative power of personalized coaching tailored specifically for creatives like you. During the sessions, I dive into the unique challenges and goals for your specific business, especially as a creative entrepreneur. That's very important because what you do, it is special and it is different than everybody else. You're going to break through some mental barriers and cultivate a mindset that really nurtures the creativity and resilience of your business. You're going to enable you to thrive in both your personal and professional life. That is my goal for you. If you're ready to embark in an amazing journey of one-on-one coaching with me, hop over to accidentalceo.co and let's get you to be the CEO that you're meant to be. One of the things that I learned from coaching and mentoring, physical therapists for many years is, I always ask them about how they want to receive that feedback, kind of like give like few scenarios and ask people to, relay back to me. But at the end of the day, a lot of people don't really know, or they don't tell you the truth. They might tell you, oh, I want you to give it to me straight. And then you try to do it and they're like, oh, that hurts.
Yeah, honestly, most of the people who say give it to me straight, they don't mean it. Like I feel like they don't mean it. Yeah.
So, yes, you can ask, take it with a grain of salt, the kinds of answers you get. I think is the more you spend time communicating, if you're a good educator, you can kind of start to catch and understand how that person is going to accept feedback the best. Continue to ask for more feedback as you give feedback and fine tune those things because it's more likely the first answer they give you is not going to be the true answer. How they can handle that feedback.
Yeah, it's rough. I think a lot of times people who imagine themselves, if they are like a firm, confident person, they deliver things a little bit harshly, they think they can take it, but it's almost always the opposite. It's almost always like, I cannot handle this feedback right now.
That's to me the equivalent of we ask patients to rate their pain from 0 to 10. 0 is no pain at all, and 10 is you being dragged by a train at like imaginable amounts of pain. And people will be sitting in front of me, they'll be like 9. I'm like, really? Are you sure?
You're like, but you don't
You're
look
not
like a 9. Yeah.
screaming, like squirming. Are you sure? They're like, yeah, I have a really high pain tolerance. I'm like, never heard an actual person that has a high pain tolerance tell me that they have a high pain tolerance. Very similar to, I feel like people take that feedback. So not an easy skill for us to master as coaches, but definitely one that we need to so we can. Everybody's different. Everybody's so unique. So I love one-on-one coaching. I think that's the easiest way to really narrow that down. But it's definitely not easy. Can you talk about maybe a moment where you truly felt like you've made a difference in someone's life through coaching?
Oh gosh. Oh,
I'm
I
sure you
get
have
so
lots of
emotional. I
those.
know. I do. Honestly, I'm like, I do. That sounded so like full of myself. I'm not. I actually keep, it's funny. I got this from teaching. I keep like a folder. It's called like my smile file or my sunshine folder. I
Oh,
like
I
call it
love
just
that.
sunshine. Yeah, I put sunshine on it and like use like the little sun emoji. And I file it away and I look at it quite often. And I think because that's what keeps me going, right? When I get really burnt out or exhausted or it's just a lot of work, I look back and I see the impact that's happened. But when I think one story that really stands out to me in particular because it goes against kind of everything that I would tell someone to do in terms of customer service and boundaries, and it goes against what I've been told, and I don't always recommend doing that, but I do think that things should be taken on a case by case basis. And I had a coaching client who had to break their contract, and they shared a little bit of why with me, but it wasn't like this huge sob story. It was just, they kept it pretty vague, and I could just kind of tell that something was off. So I allowed them to I gave them a few options. I was like, I could refund, I could defer. And normally, again, like I said, this is not something I would recommend for anybody. It's as coaches, our livelihood depends on our contracts. I'm not able to take another coaching client because of the way that my coaching is structured. I have certain amounts of time that are dedicated to certain clients. So it's very much like if somebody breaks contract, I mean, the contract is there for a reason, right?
Yep.
But I just had a gut feeling. I just had a gut feeling. And from what I had worked with them on up to that point, I just didn't see it. So I went ahead and refunded. That's what they said that they needed in that time. And they came back like 6 months later. And there was just, I mean, it was like one of those unimaginable tragedies that truly that refund did change their life more than even like what I could have coached them through. And then we picked back up on the coaching and they were able to bounce back, not just to recoup their losses, but then they were able to become the sole provider for their family, which ended up being a necessity through our work together. And I look back at that all the time. That's one that I even printed out and I don't just leave it in the folder on my desktop because the impact that I think a lot of people don't immediately think of, we think as educators by trade or as any entrepreneur, we think about our bottom line first, because whether that means it's our family or the people we employ, it's their families. But for educators, it's also not just the person we're coaching, it's their families or their clients. The impact is a ripple effect, which I know you've heard me talk about because it's like on the stickers and stuff at my conference. I have these ripples are part of my branding because I imagine that all the time. And seeing that happen in real life, I think is one of the most rewarding things. So that's as vague as I could keep it, but but also just one of those really like I think about it and I get really emotional. I'm like, that's why I do what I do is to be able to help people and the people that they're going to be able to help. So my reach goes so much further than the one person. It goes to multiples beyond them.
It's a great story. And what a great idea to keep this smile file and the things that, keep you going because we're so fast at focusing on that one negative review or the one client that didn't work out and like forget very quickly all the good things we've done before. So I'm sure that helps with mindset too and kind of stay focused and remember your why.
It does. And I did that even when I was doing just, like service-based photography. Because there's always going to be a complaint. There's just that's just humans. You can't control, work that's subjective, but it's nice to be able to revisit and say, "Okay, I'm good enough for all these people. This is not personal. I'm going to be fine."
As a coach, how do you address people that ask you, like, are you sure that you can help me?
Oh my gosh, that's such a difficult question. I try to do a lot of discovery. I try to really give them the time because I have wasted, I mean, tens of thousands of dollars on coaches that should have, they had no business taking me on as a client and programs that I had no business signing up for that were high ticket. And I understand that a sale is a sale to some people, but it's not to me. So the first thing I try to do is just take time up front to say, what are you actually looking for? And is that in my wheelhouse? And to be able to pull those examples. And I have a pretty good idea now of like, this is something I can help you with, or I have no issue saying, I don't think this is something I can help you with. And sometimes when I say that, people push back and they're like, no, I want to work with you. I think you're the one for this. And I say, well, listen, you can't say I didn't warn you. I can help. We can try to work this out together, or I'm firm. If I truly believe like this is a waste of their money, I'm going to say like, I have a recommendation for you, or I can get a recommendation for you, but it's not me. So I just think being really self-aware is the best way to handle that.
It's hard, definitely hard to answer, I agree, but a lot at the end of the day, you can teach somebody as much as you can. You know, how many of us have taken courses with somebody else or workshops or training where we receive the same amount of information, and then a year later, people are in completely different places because somebody actually strapped on their boots and went to work and got things done, and the other person just kept finding reasons not to. So, you know, there's only so much our educators and coaches can do for us too.
Yeah, I did a whole podcast episode. I should probably do a second one since it's been years since I did this one, but about being coachable and what is the responsibility of the person you're investing in and what is your responsibility as the person paying for it. Because that is I think we are just quick as a society to place blame, and I mean that's just psychological. Like we obviously don't want to blame ourselves the whole time. Unless you're me, I tend to blame myself a lot. But I do think that there's about like you have to really look at it and say, did I do my part of the bargain? Or did I just show up to a call, vent, get advice, and then not actually do that thing?
I almost like to do like a two-tier contract where, you know, there's that basic contract first. Yes, let's work together. And then once you get started and you really get a clear vision of like what's going to be, here are the things that we're going to work on. Here's what I'm responsible for. Here's what you're responsible for. Let's sign this again and make sure that we put your, you know, money where your mouth is and then get to work. What keeps you motivated and passionate about continuing to work in education other than your ripple effect?
I mean, it's those ripples, those are the number one. No, yeah, honestly, the impact is the number one thing. I think I've had to find ways because frankly, any job it gets exhausting. Any especially as an entrepreneur, any company you own, at some point things feel monotonous, at some point things feel like you're dragging. We work long hours and a lot of them, and so I think finding ways to stay motivated is really important and being I say self-aware so often because I really think that's been helpful for me, but being self-aware about what keeps you motivated. So for me, it is a huge component of that is doing things in person. Even though I say this just as transparently as possible, hosting things in person is a very big risk. It's not always very profitable. It can be, but it can also put you in the red. And so you really have to be passionate about it. Like it has to motivate you. And for me, it does. It truly does. I love my virtual work with my students, but seeing them face to face and being able to connect and like have those moments together that aren't quite as pressure filled as a 1 hour Zoom call is, I think that's what keeps me motivated to continue to go on and it fuels the rest of my work that isn't quite as exciting. So I think for me it's community, it's connection, it's people. The people are always what keep me motivated and the times that I've tried in my business. I mean, this is something I actually don't say as often as I probably should, but the times that I've focused on quote unquote like scaling, the times that I focused on the financial gains and the scaling without me in it, because that's the like that's a smart thing to do, those have been the most draining times of my life. And even though the conference and my retreats and my masterminds and all these things, they take so much out of me, they give a lot to me too. And they fuel my fire and they fuel my passion. And so that's where I'm at right now. And I'm not saying I would never do something more passive. I have passive things in my shop and I have systems and I have workflows and I'm smart about what I do. But my focus is just not to scale and take myself out of things. It's to put myself into the right things.
I love that. I'm on the same boat. I really love the one-on-one in-person kind of interacting with people. Obviously, you want to reach more people and help more people, which means there must be some kind of online component to what we do. But you know, I'm heading to Virginia next month to do some one-on-one coaching with somebody for a 2-day intensive because of how important I think that is. So, you know, I can definitely see how it can be a lot more draining when you're just focusing on growing money and you're not really bringing back to your why and connecting back to your purpose and why you started this to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, we all need money. There's nothing wrong with wanting it, but I think like you said, it's that balance of connecting of what is this for? It can't just be for a paycheck because then I might as well go work in an office, you know?
As a money lover, I can attest to that. What is a common struggle that you find with your educator clients?
I think one is burnout and time management. That's a common struggle with everybody I've ever worked with in this industry. Is there's one of us and a million things they want to do, and that's probably the number one struggle, especially for educators, because they're likely balancing something that they're already great at and that's already thriving. And the number one question I get asked by almost every client at some point is this even worth taking time away from something that's going really well to struggle again for something that might not go well? And that's a question I can never answer for them. I always answer that question with many more questions, but that's got to be the number one struggle, I think for my coaching clients in particular.
Yeah, what a great question. I actually had an educator, somebody that coaches educators, ask me that. He was actually telling me, it's like, why do you want to go into education? Why do you want, like, you're doing so well with your business, you're making six figures. Why do you want to do that? And I'm like, why would I not want to help other people do this? The understanding it does take a lot from your time and a lot of effort. And it's almost like you finally, you transition from a technician, somebody that's really good at your craft, you're really good at what you do, to you created this business, you accidentally became a CEO. Now you finally got your bearings, you know what you're doing. And then you're like, let me jump into this other boat right here that I don't know where that's going. And I need to wear the CEO hat again. And maybe I need to go back to being a technician again. And it's like, let's start this all over.
That's exactly what it's like. And you start to think to yourself, what was all that for? Why am I doing this to myself again?
What do you think? What is your theory? I don't know if you ever thought about this, but what do you think that we have such a need to keep doing something different and keep growing and keep changing? Do you have any theories of that?
I think it's like the personality type of the entrepreneur, because I cannot sit still. I'm working on a new project right now and I have no time for that, but I'm doing it anyway. And I just think it excites me, and I think it is a way to keep things fresh. I've had to be a little bit more thoughtful in the new things I take on over the years, but I think having to constantly better, it's honestly full circle to what we talked about in the beginning about how like student athletes are so competitive and with themselves. It's the same thing of I just can't be complacent and I don't want to be bored. And if I wanted to feel those things, I would have stayed in my corporate job, in my corporate office downtown, and I would have just been fine with that. And I don't think that's in the personality of an entrepreneur, of an accidental CEO. I think those of us that have the drive to make something happen, we see the beauty in the process and the end result, and we always want that process and the end result. So once we get to one end result, we want another process.
Yeah. I call it positive professional ADHD. Like,
I
give
was
me
about to
something.
say that. Or I
What
was
else can
about
I
to
do?
say it's probably my ADHD talking right now, but I think a lot of entrepreneurs are.
Exactly. Yes, that would not be surprising. So, looking ahead, what are some of the goals and projects that you're excited about for your own, business?
I mean, the number one most exciting thing is always the conference for me. I'm restructuring some things, keeping a lot of it the same because so much love came out of that. Like we had our feedback was it was difficult to find things to change by request. So I'm trying to be smart and like I'm trying to be intentional to make things stay fresh for our return. We have so many people returning, which is exciting. So that's exciting. I'm working on a new project I can't share a ton about right now, but it is also going to be for educators. So once I can, you'll be the first to know.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. So it's always fun to have a new project though. And then of course, just my ongoing amazing coaching clients. And I'm actually closing a few out right now and then taking a little bit of a break for the summer. So I'll be onboarding people again in the early fall. And I'm excited about that because, that's the same, but also new.
That's great. I love that. What advice would you give to someone starting their journey as an educator or even an entrepreneur based on the lessons you have learned yourself and with coaching others?
Okay. Number one piece of advice is there's no race. You're not in a race with anybody. Keep your head down. I mean, social media makes it really difficult to do this, but you just have to remind yourself that you can't compare. I mean, there's like, it's so cliche, but like you cannot compare your year one to somebody else's year 10. And you really can't even compare your year one to someone else's year one. There were people who I started with who have far surpassed me in many metrics, but there are also people who took their time, and there's no right or wrong. So I think, just like you said at the beginning, giving yourself that patience, that grace, and understanding that things take the amount of time that they take, and to be hard on yourself for that, it doesn't help anything in the moment.
So, for people that are in the education world and the coaching world, when is it time for them to look for a coach?
I'm always looking for a coach. So this is like, you're catching me at a time where I'm in between my coaches. So it's funny because I haven't had one this year. I'm going to a conference to test out a new educator that I've never learned from before. I've never taken any content from them before. I'm excited about that. I always try to do something with once a year with someone who I haven't learned from, and if that goes well, maybe I'll find a coach there, who knows. But I think you should always be seeking out education no matter where you are in your experience, because even though this is my 11th year in business, I still have so much to learn from people who maybe have been around longer than me, or maybe are just doing something differently than me but have been around less time, and they just have a different skill set. So I think you should always have somebody in your corner.
Well, thank you so much for all the good information. I'm sure we got a lot to digest and apply. Tell people where they can find you if they want to work with you.
Yeah, you can find me on at layleeemadi.com or Laylee_Emadi on Instagram. And of course, the Creative Educator Conference. If you look us up, that's a great place to connect with me too. But I love, love, love connecting with people one-on-one. Mostly on Instagram is probably the fastest way to hear from me.
I love that. We'll make sure we link everything for you guys. And if by the time this airs, she already has the new surprise out, we will link that for you as well on the show notes. Thank you so much, lady. I'm so excited to see you again later next year for the conference. Yes, and continue to learn from you and supporting you as you continue to grow your business.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Awesome. I'll see you guys next week with another episode of the Accidental CEO podcast. Bye. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Accidental CEO podcast. Thanks for hanging out with us in the world where creativity and business strategy collide. I am Nata Salvatore, thrilled to have shared this time with you. Remember, every episode is a step closer to mastering the art of being an accidental CEO. So don't miss out. Hit subscribe, drop us a sweet review, and spread the word to your creative tribe. Your next big breakthrough could be just one episode away. Join us next time for more insights, laughs, and actionable tips. Keep pushing boundaries, dreaming big, and embracing the beautiful chaos of entrepreneurship. Here's to make magic happen in your business and beyond.